You want to know what it was really like diving for pearls in 1800s Philippines? Good, because this isn't about legends. This is about you, a child diver. You don't wear a mask, you bite a nose clip, tie on a stone and drop until the rope tugs. You don't search for treasure, you work a ledge, you pry, bag and come up before your chest gets ideas. And when the shift ends, you hand over the basket, take a coin that feels lighter than your breath, and show up tomorrow like nothing happened. That's the job. This story doesn't flinch. It's written from the rope on your hip, the cut you salt, the breath you slow when a grey shape passes underneath. Over the next minutes, you'll step onto the banker they never put in paintings. You'll taste the brine, feel the stone pull, and wonder why no one's asking the right questions. Like, who gets paid when you find a pearl? How long can you be efficient at 12? And what keeps sharks polite, speed or boredom? If you like stories that smell like salt, rope and work, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, how many strokes do you think you'd last on one breath? The sky is still charcoal when you shoulder the coil of line and step onto the outrigger, wood wet as tongue and colder than the night allowed. The lagoon slaps the hull with the patience of a collector, every tap a reminder you owe it air. Smoke from a cook fire drifts across the beach, sweet and stale, rice maybe. Or last night's fish reheated until the bones complain. Your stomach answers with a hollow song, and the foreman answers your stomach with a grin that's all gums and debt. He tells you the reef is hungry, and it eats children first because the yes go down fast. The older crew laughs without much sound, the kind of laugh that's learned to save its breath. You take your place at the crossbeam, feet finding the slick groove worn by kids who outgrew this job or didn't. The paddles rise and drop, water burping against the bamboo floats. Dawn doesn't break so much as seep, a grey sip along the edge of the islands, and everybody pretends it's enough. You don't own gear so much as borrow problems. A split bamboo clip for the nose, a cord basket that smells like old algae, and the hands of everyone who failed before you. A smooth river stone tied for ballast that promises to take you quick and leave you quicker. The line around your waist is scratchy with salt and fray. If it snaps, you get to learn how long a child can tread and think at the same time. The older boy, Lito, checks your knots with fingers cracked like dry riverbed. He looks at you like a mirror that's been dropped once, then twice. There's a mouth-worn charm at his neck, a scallop shell with a hole hacked through and the edge chewed smooth by nerves. He tells you two things: don't shout underwater. Sharks like manners. And when you come up, don't breathe like a drum, breathe like you've got work left before you're allowed to die. The foreman barks at you both to stop tutoring and start earning. You lick your lips and taste rope and old copper, last night's smoke, and the little lie you tell yourself that you'll be faster than pain today. You go over the side on the foreman's count. 1, 2, and then the 3 never comes, just the shove of his palm between your shoulders. Sea hits you like a cold door. Ears tighten, jaw aches. The nose clip bites so hard your sinuses flare like they've been salted on purpose. Your lungs fold their arms and sulk. You kick down past a skin of silver fish that shatter and sew themselves back together, past ropes of jelly that write question marks along your neck. The reef arrives like a ruined church, broken spires of coral, sand poured into pews, light slanting through in trembling sheets. The stone pulls you with its simple opinion. You belong lower. You angle one hand to stall, the other to guard your stomach from the stone's idiot insistence. The basket bumps your hip like a sleepy animal, and you think, for a breath you can't spare, of rice boiled to paste and your mother's laugh before debt taught it to whisper. You land in the dust of old shells, listening to the long, slow drum of your heart as if someone is knocking from the inside. Pearl oysters wedge themselves in seams, lips furred with silt. You pry with the dull blade and pray the animal doesn't decide to pinch and make a rosary of your fingers. The basket drifts at your side like a lazy witness. A shadow passes. Another. Your mouth tastes like iron filings and old blood. Sharks don't always look like sharks at first. They look like grammar mistakes the sea wrote too fast. You keep your back toward the stoniest wall and work with the speed of someone telling a lie that has to sound like truth. An eel pours itself out of a hole and considers your wrist. You offer it nothing except the promise of leaving. Sand creeps into the back of your throat, and you swallow it because the alternative is something that sounds like panic. Panic is expensive. Panic charges interest. Time is the first thing you spend. Pain is the change that clinks in your ribs. You work through it, blade, twist, bag, breath counting itself down to the stupid moment you look up and the surface is too far away. You haul on the line. It answers. Leto hauls too, a jerky rhythm that says he found something and doesn't want hands on it. You push off the reef with toes that will be torn raw by noon and rise into the warmer water, where the light feels like it's been used by someone else. The boat's shadow smears above, and the foreman leans to peer like a crow, checking if a lantern has anything shiny inside. A shape moves to your left. The grammar mistake corrects itself into a shark with bad manners and a very clear understanding that you are clumsy meat tied to a snack-coloured rope. You keep rising, not fast enough to be interesting, not slow enough to be a story. The shark loses interest, which is the same as mercy out here, and you promise to be boring again whenever asked. Hands grab your line and drag you the last reach, and the noise comes back all at once. Oar knock, gulls, the foreman's voice like a file. Air is a bad gift at first, too sharp, too flavoured with tar and old men. You cough it into shape. The foreman counts shells with the care he never uses on names. 4, 8, 12. His eyebrows go up like rigging when he finds one with a promising bulge. He doesn't thank you. He says you're slow. Leto smirks and tips his basket so you can see the slick, stubborn mouths he pried free. You nod because jealousy steals breath you need. Someone passes you a dipper. The water is sun-warm, tastes like rope and regret, and you drink it like a person who still has choices. The foreman spits beetle into the sea and tells you both to carry heavier stones next time, because if the reef is a church, then kids who sink fast get to pray first. The sun climbs and the heat turns the boat into a frying pan you can't crawl out of. Salt dries on your skin in a map of all the places that hurt. Everywhere then, but some coasts are sharper. Your hair crackles with it. The foreman chews until his teeth look like someone tried to hammer them out and got bored. He spits in a neat red arc and tells you to carry more weight next time. You ask for a smaller stone. He laughs like a snapped oar. He promises you a smaller grave if you argue again. You check the knots yourself. You pretend you're not counting other boats and how many small heads bob beside them, and you tell your lungs to do better work with less pay. The reef waits, the sharks wait, the rope waits, and the day, which should have felt like a wide field, is already a narrow hallway with tide for walls. You grease the nose clip with spit because it bites less that way, and because salt eats everything faster than time. And time already has a mouthful of you. The rope has raised ridges on your hips where it rubs, pink turning to angry, and the basket thong squeaks each time you shift like a tiny animal asking to be spared. Leto shows you a heavier stone, flat and black, slick as a cooked mussel shell. He calls it prayer and shrugs, because either you sink quick or you pray longer. You eat a handful of cold rice someone saved from yesterday, grains hard as sand and tasting faintly of smoke and sea, and you chew until your jaw feels like a hinge that needs grease. The foreman slaps your shoulder, friendly like a storm, and says down on 2. You breathe once, twice, face the cutwater, and let the sun burn a straight line along your neck so you remember the way back up. The shove is less a push than a reminder, and the water closes, heavy and sour where the surface oil from the engine spreads rainbow skins that sting your eyes. Pressure climbs your face like a hand, thumb pressing behind your nose, and you swallow and hack the equalization into place while the stone tugs. Light tenses into blades around you, fish split, and a barracuda writes its message across your peripheral like a bright nail. You love and hate the first 5 beats of the dive. Lungs hot with promise, legs still sure, noise gone like a debt collector on holiday. Then the reef pulls you into its teeth and the basket bumps along rocks so rough it rips skin through callus, and a crown of thorn star sits like a rude king on a boulder and dares you to brush it. You work the seam between 2 coral heads where silt gathers and oysters brace their ugly lips. Knife in, twist, the muscle shivers, a little cough of sand and the shell gives like a stubborn relative. Breath counts itself in the soft burn that blooms behind the sternum. Petals opening when you would prefer stones, and your ears sing thinly. A mosquito trapped in a bottle. A sea snake paints a stripe along the edge of your vision. Scales like wet silk. Head curious and precise. You offer the flat of your hand because movement is how stories end here. You stow 5, then 7, then lose count on purpose because counting is hope with a stopwatch. The first panic nips when the knife catches and the oyster laughs with its whole body. You almost yank, you don't. You breathe nothing and think of steam rising off cassava on a plate you don't have, of your sister's elbows sticking like knotted rope through a too small shirt. You tell your hands to be less proud and the shell comes, slick spit of vesicle on your fingers, slime cold as apology. You lift the basket, kick off, and the stone leers from the sand asking if you meant to come back for it. You do, because new boys who lose ballast get new scars and old jokes, and you have enough of both for now. Up is farther than down ever was. Your chest squeezes around a hollow that wants to become a hole, and your throat tastes like pennies and cheap tobacco you've never smoked. You drag the line once, twice, and hear the boat answer faintly in the rope's rumble, and you count the rise in flickering panels of light like counting windows in a house you're not invited into. A shadow glides parallel, shark again, or something learning the word, and you angle your body to be less interesting, shoulders rolled, legs a steady metronome. Surface breaks you like a pot, and the air bites like cold sugar. You cough it down and blink until the boat is solid, and the world stops shivering. The foreman looks for pearls the way some men look for God, chin-tipped, mouth tense. He finds only work. He tells you to stop shaking so loudly. By mid-morning your fingertips prune and split, small white mouths that complain every time they meet rock, and the salt presses into each crack until the world tastes of metal. Lito hums a song with no words, and the beat keeps his hands moving like he's shelling beans in some kinder season. He palms a tiny crab and flicks it at you, and it clings to your forearm with delicate lies. You flick it back. He doesn't smile, but the corner of his mouth forgets itself for a second. The sun climbs to the place where it cooks thought, and the boat smells of beetle and fish oil, and the sour cloth of boys pretending they aren't cold in hot weather. You drink, it comes back up your nose as brine, and the foreman calls break over before your swallowing has figured itself out. Dive again. The word is a broom. It clears everything else. This time you aim for the deeper cut, where a white fan of sand drops away and sound gets rubbery. Your eyes ache in their sockets, a dull push, and your ribs creak like a wet basket. You find a cluster wedged under a lip, reach, and something in the dark space touches your knuckle with the politeness of a debt marker. Electric jolt, jelly threads, fingers flash with pins, and you have to decide whether this is pain you can rent for the minute or pain that will charge for the month. You rent it. You always do. Knife, twist, bag, and then that old humming in the skull that means the lights want their room back. You kick, the stone sulks, the basket drags, and your heart knocks like someone late for their own life. You climb back in, teeth clicking from a shiver that feels ridiculous in this heat. And the foreman hands you a split wedge to bite when you go down again, as if a wood could teach lungs manners. His breath smells like old lime and something medicinal he swears isn't rum. Lito refastens your ballast, double half hitch tight enough to bruise, and says he'll stay close on this one in case your head gets romantic ideas about turning black. You nod like you have authority over anything. The outrigger creaks, the bamboo pins complain, salt has turned every fibre into a scab. A gull lands, stares, waits for your fingers to drop something edible, and looks personally offended when you don't. The foreman tells you to stop petting the air and get under it. He spits red and says the skiff will be coming later, and skiffs are generous like cats are generous, only when they'd like you to appreciate a dead thing. He says it like weather, which is what he thinks of you too. Down is more honest than up. The water takes you without questions and gives you what it has. Cold first, then pressure, then the kind of quiet that isn't peace so much as a dare. You pass a forest of soft coral that brushes your thigh like a crowd with opinions, and a turtle lifts its flat head to blink, unbothered by your small debt. You level off near a sandy cut scored with currants, silt smoking up at your touch as if the ground resents being asked. Oysters hunker in the pockets like bad knees, and when your blade pries at them they answer with that soft, slippery sigh that says they are older than you and don't care. The basket tugs and swivels, the stone taps the shelf. Your ears thrum like bees in a bottle. You watch your bubbles refuse to rise in a straight line and decide it's fine. Pretending keeps you employed longer than complaining ever will. A shadow folds over the sand, you freeze without meaning to, knife angled like a useless prayer. It's big, torpedo big, the grey of old roof tin, and it writes a single sentence down current that your bones read before your eyes do. Keep being unimportant. Lito appears to your right, small and angry at the size of the ocean, and he doesn't look at the shadow at all. He works faster, cheap blade sawing, wrists turning with that ugly grace you're trying to copy. He taps your arm once, work, not worry, and shoulders the basket toward the denser coral where the light edits itself into stripes. You move in beside him, back to back with a rock, and harvest like you're shelling pity from a hard day. The shark slides off the sentence it wrote and drafts a new one somewhere else. The reef keeps its gossip. The current fingers the hair at your temple, curious and cold. The sea doesn't bleed often, and when it does, no one writes a song about it. On the surface, the sun has grown teeth. The boat's planks radiate heat through your wet shorts until the skin feels boiled without the dignity of being cooked. Someone's opened a sack of dried fish. The smell is a joke the day tells to make sure no one laughs. You tear off a piece anyway and chew until the salt cuts your cheeks raw, then wash it with water that has learned too much from the bucket. The foreman thumps your haul with 2 fingers and does that tight lip nod that means he can afford to be disappointed and still take the money. He points his chin at the horizon where a small sail scribbles itself toward you. Traders, he says, like a prayer you aren't invited to. He adds that the sea is a queen and today she's disguising herself as more work. Queens are smart that way. Afternoon clouds stack, thick as laundry you'll never get around to washing, and the sea surface chops into short temper. The skiff shows as a pale slash, sail patched and proud, hull greased dark where it kisses the ocean. Men you don't know climb aboard like buyers at a market, poking with their eyes, trampling your rope with their shoes. One wears a hat too stiff for this latitude. He asks for pearls and doesn't look at the hands that bring them. The foreman opens shells with a knife meant for coconuts and pretends not to wince when he finds nothing. He laughs when he does, a little bark that has less joy than an empty pan. You stand just close enough to smell their tobacco and oil, and just far enough that your damp fish-salted shirt won't embarrass anyone. The stiff hat tells a joke about children who sink quick, and the crew breathes the insult like air. Thin, necessary, and not worth arguing with. You go because the skiff smells like coins and tobacco, and the foreman gets generous with promises when other men are listening. The stone drags, the reef rises, your ears argue, then surrender. You work the lip where the sand sloughs like tired skin, fingers numb and clever at the same time. Then you make the kind of mistake that doesn't look like anything. You wedge your wrist deeper for leverage, and an oyster decides to live longer. The hinge bites, knuckles flare, the knife slips and kisses your thumb at the nail with the affection of a snake. Warmth blooms in a straight, rude line. Blood carries its iron to your tongue by rumour. You jerk. The basket stutters, the stone tilts, and you watch your own bright thread of red unroll and vanish as if the water is hungry for paint. You clamp the cut to your palm, kick twice and taste panic the way you taste old coins. Thin, sour, oh sour, memorable. You haul the rope with the stubbornness of someone who hasn't been paid yet. Up again, slower, because the thumb insists on being the loudest idea in your body. The surface hammers. You blink, sting out of your eyes, and Leto is there. Expression set flat. A check mark drawn where eyebrows should meet. He wraps strip cloth around your thumb, yanks it cruel tight, and tells you to drink without spilling it on the deck like a child. The foreman glances, counts the shells, and announces the wound unprofitable. He says to keep your hands below the water where no one has to look at your mistakes. The trader in the stiff hat pretends not to watch you bleed on your own feet and asks politely if there's any chance of larger stones down there. Leto ties another doll, unnecessarily hard because he is who he is, and claps your shoulder, an approval disguised as assault. He says you can hold a blade with the other hand if the cut gets bored. You laugh once because the body is rude and likes comfort. You go back over because that's the job's only punchline. You drop again with the thumb wrapped like a lie you hope holds, the cut stinging each time the water decides to remind you who owns salt. The stone's pull is a sentence with no punctuation, just a long, exhausting clause, and your ears pop with a small insult that makes your eyes water. The reef breathes sand in little sighs, and your skin goes to goose flesh where shade crosses and leaves. You wedge into a crease, blade ready in the other hand, and the wound throbs a beat half a second off from your heart, like the drum at the back of a festival you can't afford to attend. The basket lift squeaks, the mask of water presses, a parrotfish gnaws coral with the sound of someone chewing chalk and looks at you without respect. Blood tastes thinner when you're this far down. It shows up in your mouth like a rumour and vanishes as if ashamed to be caught. You work faster than style allows, blade, pry, pivot, bag, and squeeze your thighs to keep the stone honest. Leto ghosts on your right, a blur of elbows and rope burn scars, and taps coral with the butt of his knife twice, a warning or hello, or both. 2 reef tips away, sand lifts as if a sigh grew impatient. The shape that follows is clumsy hunger wrapped in muscle, head blunt, eye mean. You angle your shoulder to give it nothing. Leto does worse. He cracks an oyster under his heel and lets the meat cloud. The shark trails the cloud like a bored inspector and decides your meat is too organised. When you finally pull for the surface, your chest burns like you swallowed a lantern and kept the wick, and your calves tremble with that sugar-failed shake that doesn't wait for permission. The rope whispers information to your skin. Leto climbing 2, foreman leaning, boat drift to leeward. The light slaps your eyes open in noisy plates. You burst through and spit a mouthful of brine so bitter, it feels personal. The foreman takes the basket, weighs the lie of it, and says good in a tone that means the opposite. The trader's hat is off now, revealing hair that has never met honest rain. He picks shells with 2 fingers like the sea might stain him. Leto grins at nothing and tightens your bandage one more notch because pain is his favourite hobby when it belongs to someone else. The clouds harden and the wind drags its knuckles across the lagoon before raising a chop that slaps the outrigger like a mother who's out of excuses. The skiff crew buys 3 pearls that look like moons chipped from a plate, pays like it hurts, and sails off with new opinions about your worth. The foreman pockets most of the hurt and peels a coin for each boy, with a glance that says he's computed the price of every breath you took today. The coin is warm from his hand, slick with beetle spit, and heavier than it deserves to be. You don't look at yours too long. Money makes promises to eyes that it never keeps. You tuck it where you keep your good lies and your last extra fishhook and try not to taste your cut thumb every time your mouth forgets itself. Afternoon smears into that ugly glassy hour where the sun has stopped caring and the sea pretends to nap while plotting. Your shoulders crunch each time you roll them. Little gravel sounds under skin, and your lower back decides to be 50 years older than your neck. The boat smells of hot wood, old rope, human onion, and the mangy sweet of damp cloth, mildewing in real time. You dive into the smell because the water, for all its salt and snakes, is gentler. Down in the stripy light, you find a tongue of sand wedged like a path between coral teeth, and work it like a field, methodical, unromantic. Your stomach empties new air into itself and complains in whale song. Your head answers with a slow surge of drum that means you've got the timing wrong again. You keep going because the day does not care what you misjudge. A squall finds you with the sneak of a debt collector at dusk. No noise, then all noise. Rain needles the surface so hard it looks like the sea is boiling from the wrong side, and the foreman barks everyone up as if the storm understands schedules. You climb in, numb and hot at once, water running out of your ears as if someone opened taps on your head. The taste of the rain is shockingly clean for 3 swallows. Then it remembers the sky's old smoke and turns metallic. The outrigger flexes underfoot with that sharp bamboo complaint, and you grab the gunwale as a wave tries to teach you humility by example. Leto ties down the baskets with wrists that move without asking permission from the rest of him, and the foreman cusses the wind in 2 languages, both unhelpful. The squall passes like most threats that can be outrun, leaving behind a sky rinsed thin and a sea that acts innocent. The air cools just enough to make your wet shirt feel deliberately cruel. On the beach, a line of Nipa roofs shows itself, smoke muscles up from a cook fire, and dogs argue with distant thunder because thunder always loses arguments it walks away from. You offload the day into a crate that smells like everyone's bad choices, and the foreman tells you to be early tomorrow in the tone men use when they're late for themselves. He says a big boat is coming in after sunrise from farther out, from men who sell mirrors and take shell, and that boat pays in more coins and stiffer expectations. He says bring your lungs, as if you've got spares. You walk home barefoot because sandals make blisters when the straps go wet sour, and the road is packed dirt that remembers every cart that ever insulted it. The village greets you with the ordinary cruelty of evening. Smoke that clings to your hair, laughter that doesn't need you, and the sound of someone beating laundry on a stone like it's a person who owes. Your house, palm, bamboo, cheap tin, 3 good nails, 2 lies, leans into its stilts like an old man who forgot to agree with the wind. Inside, the air is hot and grateful to be still. Your mother spoons rice that sticks like a loyal dog and the last of a fish stew that tastes of ginger, old bones, and salt that never left. Your sister rolls you a scrap bandage from cloth that used to be a dress sleeve and asks if the shark said please this time. You tell her they did, and she smirks like a person who can count. You sleep on a mat that still remembers other backs, the woven reeds pressed flat where worry wore them, and you dream short because long dreams cost. The cut on your thumb pulses like a bad drum next door, keeping time with a gecko clicking in the rafters. Your mother curls around a cough she won't admit to, and your sister lies rigid as a plank, stubborn even when asleep. Outside, a rooster argues with the moon and loses. The air is stew, ginger, sweat, wood smoke, the wet dog smell of your shirt, heavy enough to chew. You turn on the sore hip, scratch salt from your scalp and tell yourself that if sleep won't bargain, you'll just steal a little. You do, and it comes mean and shallow like water in the dry month. Before dawn, someone bangs a spoon on a pot in the neighbour's yard and the sound shakes rice out of your dreams. The air outside is a damp rag you have to push through. It slaps your face, sticks, then lets go the way debt never does. You test your joints, discover new opinions in your shoulders, and rewrap the thumb with cloth that smells of last week's soap and yesterday's tide. The foreman's whistle loiters in the alley, like a stray dog that knows which houses give scraps. You swallow what's left of sleep and step out. The beach is already awake in the way living things wake when money walks by. Nets flop like lazy handwriting, women knee-deep in foam slap laundry until it agrees, and a boy smaller than you sells shrimp from a basket that smells like old ropes and new salt. The foreman plants his hands on his hips as if he grew there, and next to him waits a boat you don't recognise. Broader hull, taller mast, paint that pretends to be expensive. You board with the other kids and the bamboo gives that tired sigh like an old aunt who knows how the story ends. The big boat's deck is smooth and hot under your feet, the wood oil to a shine that makes you feel dirty by reflex. A man in a red sash talks to the foreman without moving his mouth much, words tidy and edged. He smells like cloves and confidence. He wants volume, he wants speed, he wants the reef combed to the skull. He doesn't want to know your names, which is generous of him, because names make it harder to pretend you're just ballast that sometimes breathes. The sail drags you to the lip where the shelf drops, and all the island noises go small and tinny. The water shifts colour and mood, heavier, colder, threaded with long muscles of current that press your calves and try to lean you somewhere you didn't vote for. The first dive out here is a new religion. Stone to waist, knife to fist, basket to hip, eyes to slits. Down past the comfortable green into a blue that insists, your ears complain in higher pitches, and the light tilts into tall pillars that keep no one upright. You taste copper in the back of your nose as you bully the pressure to behave, and your jaw aches with the stubborn lock it learned from hunger. A barracuda writes itself along the edge of your vision like a bright nail, unimpressed. You keep your hands small, your kicks smaller. Work becomes the only language that doesn't argue. You and Lito slide along a ledge the colour of old bone, passing your basket back and forth like gossip no one should hear. Your thumb stops singing and starts humming, a low ache that blends with the steady drum in your chest. Above the boat is a dark thought. Below, the drop is a longer thought. Something large glides far off and decides nothing. You wedge under an eyebrow of coral and find a seam crowded with shells big as your palm, lips scuffed and stubborn. The reef gives you its usual answers, scrapes, slime, the neat click of hinges, losing arguments, and you take them like payments. Your fingers wrinkle into old people's skin and then split at the creases, little white mouths that drink salt. You blow out a thread of air just to hear it lie. On deck, the man with the sash opens shells like he's peeling oranges, quick and careless, juice, meat, spattering his shoes. He finds 3 pearls in an hour, and that makes him think he's generous. He tells the foreman to make the boys carry more stone, then tells a joke about mermaids that makes the older men laugh and the boys look at their feet. You drink grey water that tastes like a nail, and feel it slide cold into a belly that wants hot rice. Lito flicks a bit of oyster at your shoulder, and you let it stick, because picking it off would admit you have an extra movement to spare. When the bell clanks for the next run, The bell is just a spanner on a cleat, but it still feels like church. You drop with Leto on your shoulder and the stone acting like it has an opinion about you. Midway down, the line kisses your ankle and then remembers to rap. It tightens with that intimate cruelty only rope knows. You stop kicking, twist, and your lungs mark the seconds with a sour heat that crawls up your throat. You thumb the knot, find the lay of the twist, and feed the loop back the way it arrived. The rope sulks and lets go. By noon the deck burns and the world smells like steel and sun, and men who forgot what shade felt like. The sash tells a story about a diver who found a pearl the size of an egg and died happy. Leto mutters that dying happy is a rich man's fairy tale. You chew rice turned back into stones and get ready. When the foreman says the afternoon will be kinder if you act like it deserves it. By mid-afternoon the wind shifts again. A long exhale from the outer channel that roughens the skin of the sea and makes the hull drum in a new rhythm. The foreman decides rhythm is profit and snaps his fingers for another set. You grease the clip, check the knot, suck 2 breaths that taste like old tin, and step off before your legs can remember stairs. The water sews itself shut above your head. Cold climbs your spine, polite at first and then personal. You drop into blue architecture, columns of light leaning like tired pillars, and the noise from the boat shrinks to a rumour. Pressure negotiates with your face, thumb behind your nose, ache at your jaw hinge, the old pledge you make to your ears that you will be reasonable this time. The stone tugs like an insult you can't afford to answer. The reef lifts, jagged and sure, and opens its messy pantry. You find the field again, a shelf edged with antler coral, silt pooled like flour in a basin, and begin the old argument with things that don't want relocating. Knife under lip, twist, shoulder against stone, breath holding an opinion that grows less polite. The oyster's cold spit slicks your bandage, and you feel the cut reopen with a small treacherous sigh. Salt goes in like a bookkeeper. A sheet of glass fish pours past your cheek, each one a thought you won't have later. You nurse the hinge until it coughs, slide the shell, then another, into the basket that bumps your hip like a sleepy dog. The light gets taller and thinner. Your chest answers with heat that blooms and keeps blooming. You hate the feeling and you keep it, because hate is cheap and air is not. When you kick up the current decides you are a loose leaf and tries to shelve you somewhere unhelpful. Your calves spark with small riots, your ribs ratchet tight. Halfway to the surface your head fuzzes at the edges like paper left in fog. You pause on instinct, flatten against a rock lip, and listen to your own body throw furniture around. Stupid. You move again, slower, a careful metronome, because fast is how boys faint and boys who faint become stories told softly on beaches. The rope hums from above, a change in tension, and you picture Leto shifting his weight, foreman leaning, the boat yawing to the chop. You break the last stretch in 3 pushes that feel like lies you can almost afford. The deck holds heat the way grudges do. You stand on the shaded side of a coil and smear crushed ginger over your thumb because the old women swear it keeps a wound from sulking. It stings like advice. The man in the sash pretends not to stare at the way your chest still heaves. He talks about quotas, about merchants upriver who know the value of lustre and the cost of boys. The foreman nods like a dog trained to agree with thunder. Leto eats a strip of dried mango someone magicked from a pocket and hands you the last sliver because generosity counts if someone is watching. It tastes like sun hammered flat and saved. Clouds thicken to the west, a blue bruise swelling over the channel, and the foreman decides to steal another hour from the weather. You go because refusing is a rich man's sport. This time you take 2 stones and tell your legs to pretend. The fall is quick, the pressure rude. You level at a shelf where feather fans ripple like skirts, their edges lined with invisible needles that beg to be learned the hard way. You work with a petty, tidy fury that feels like safety. Pry, bag, shuffle, move. A shadow leans out of the water and then back, just curiosity with teeth, so you give it your worst side and keep your hands small. It happens the small way most trouble does. A crab skitters, your wrist turns, the knife slips and punches the heel of your hand. A neat, bright heat opens. You don't drop the blade. You don't have drops to spare. Blood feathers, pretty if you forget the price. You clamp the cut with your mouth, taste salt, iron, the thin sweetness of yourself, and decide the surface is overdue. 1 tug on the line, then 2. It answers late again, lazy as a cat. You go anyway, counting in quiet curses, ears shrilling, calves making small promises they won't keep. The shark tilts out of grey and fails to admire you, then slides into the weather you haven't met yet. You climb through the last pane of light and are noise again. Clatter, caw, a man arguing with a rope. The foreman takes your basket and not your bleeding hand. He says weather, boys, weather, as if weather will take a bribe if you speak to it like a creditor. The first fat drops smack the deck like thrown seeds. The air smells of wet iron and leaf mould. You wrap your hand tighter until the pulse goes dull, suck the line salt from your lip, and pretend the sky doesn't look like a decision you forgot to make. The squall arrives like a thrown sheet. Visibility goes chalky, wind jumps a fence and sprints, and the mast moans a confession you don't want to hear. The foreman shoves the bow toward the mouth of the lagoon, where water turns from slate to bottle green, and the chop softens into a hard, tight slap. Your skin pebbles under a wet gust that smells like bruised vines and old smoke. Leto laughs once. The bark of a man who knows jokes are tools. Onshore, roofs crouch, palms do their practiced bow. You hold the gunwale and feel the boat flex like a rib under a punch, and you hope the reef is finished speaking your name for today. The lagoon takes you in the way a tired aunt takes in another errand. No welcome, only room. You nose the boat into the shallows where the bottom turns from dark thought to pale gossip, and boys jump out to drag her up the sand with rope-burned hands. Rain stutters off, leaving drops clinging to your eyelashes like seeds. The big boat anchors farther out. The man with the sash yells about schedules and then disappears under a tarp to protect his hat from honesty. You unload baskets full of oysters that grunt when you shift them, each shell rough as an old heel, each edge prepared to argue with skin. The village air hangs heavy, wood smoke damped by rain, fish oil reheated, the sweet rot of crushed leaves. You already taste the work to come in the back of your throat, a chalky expectation that is almost hunger and almost resentment. Shucking happens in a lean-to that pretends to be a shed. Poles, palm thatch, a floor of trampled sand glazed with old shell dust. You squat on your heels because chairs are for men who can leave. The knife is broad, pitted, mean. It smells like 10,000 small deaths and one bad joke. You wedge the blade at the hinge, twist gently then brutally, catching the meat in a woven scoop before it spills away. It's all muscle and surrender, slime cold as apology, rainbow sheens that make pretty promises to eyes that forgot to be children. Leto sits across from you, knees splayed, jaw busy with nothing, and matches you shell for shell. You don't talk much because words are another thing to clean later. Pearls don't show themselves like lessons. They hide in folds and pockets, soft as gums, hard as thrown seed, sometimes set like moons in a mean sky of grit. When one falls into your palm, it feels heavier than the size deserves, like a secret that asks to be spent. The foreman hovers, tongue pressing his cheek, and takes each find into a small bowl lined with rags that stopped being white before you were born. He turns them under a smoky lamp, nodding or frowning, grading hopes with his thumbnail. You keep your eyes on your knife and your fingers out of the hinge. You have enough scars to explain already. The smell becomes a room you wear, brine, iodine, a meat sweetness that could almost be fruit if it didn't cling to your hair. Flies draft into service, their small feet confident, their interest relentless. Your thumb throbs time, wrapped dark with ginger and work blood, and each shell powder cut freckles your forearms with stings that heat up when you sweat. A small boy, too small for the boats yet, fans the flies with a palmetto leaf until he's bored and wanders off to steal mango skins. You envy his boredom the way some people envy gold. Outside, the last of the storm grumbles itself into the hill, and from the beach comes the slap of a wet rope and the scold of a mother who has counted wrong again. By lantern, the world narrows to circles of work. The flame gutters with every draught and paints everything the colour of old honey, including the cuts. Your stomach gnaws the notion of rice, your mouth tastes like coins soaked in tea, and your back learns a new alphabet of complaints. Leto clears his throat and says nothing important. That the man in the sash looks like mildew with shoes, that sharks respect punctuality, the boys who dream of city streets come home with soft hands and nothing to carry. You answer with a joke about marrying a pearl and living rich inside a shell. He snorts, and the sound holds more compassion than any coin you've seen, then opens another oyster like a door that learned manners too late. When the lamp oil runs thin, the foreman whistles dismissal like a church that doesn't care if you attend. He counts out coins with sticky fingers, 2 for Leto, 1 for you, 1 held up between thumb and forefinger before it vanishes into his mouthy pockets for rope wear. You don't argue because arguments need breakfast. You rinse your hands in a bucket that was clean at dawn and now smells like old knives. The water stings, bubbles a pink truth, and leaves your skin slick as eel. You wipe them on your shorts that never dry and feel the grit grind into the cuts like small patient stones. Home is a low door and the relief of shade. Your mother lifts her chin without looking up, reading the day on your shoulders, and spoons you rice that clings in loyal lumps. The soup is thin, onion and ginger doing their best to forgive the water for being itself. You eat with the speed of a thief and lick the spoon like ceremony. Your sister asks if pearls taste sweet. You tell her they taste like breath you're not done paying for. She rolls her eyes, wraps your thumb again, and says you should sleep before you think. You lie down on the mat that smells like family and damp weather, and listen to rain begin again, soft as a rumour you want to trust. Sleep comes like a truce signed in pencil. You drift through water that holds its breath, through fields of shells that blink like slow eyes, through a mouth of reef that chews names into foam. In the dream you keep trying to climb a rope made of wet hair, and when you finally reach the surface the sky is a pearl, and the foreman's hands are the cracks. You wake to your own teeth, set hard, jaw aching, chest lifting like a bellows that owes tax. Outside someone laughs, low and tired. A dog shakes rain from its coat. The night presses its damp knee into the house and waits to be paid. You slide your cut hand under your cheek to warm the pulse, count the coins you don't have yet, and tell the dark you'll meet it again at the water. Before dawn, the foreman's whistle cuts the dark like a thin knife that knows where you live, and your legs bargain for 5 more breaths they don't get. Your thumb bandage has gone from white to a history lesson. The ginger stink has mellowed into something like old tea. You drink water that tastes of tin roof and frog and sneak a shard of dried cassava that crunches like a bad idea. Leto is already at the boat, hair damp with either sea or sleep. Here it's the same, and he passes you the heavier stone without comment. The man with the sash is back. Shoes clean, smile thinner. He wants the outer ledge today, the place where the reef steps off into blue that keeps secrets better than priests. He tells the foreman boys dive better when they're hungry. You decide not to test whether that's science or sermon. The paddle out is a rhythm you could hate if you had spare energy. Bamboo bends, water knocks, the hull talks in its old wood language about weight and fools. The sky remembers pink and then changes its mind. A pale strip peels above cloud like a fish belly. Your skin prickles with salt dried from yesterday pretending to be new, and the rope around your waist finds last night's chafe and writes over it in a worse hand. The outer ledge shows as a darker green that suddenly thinks better of itself and drops, the surface pocked with slicks where currents argue. The foreman spits red, counts to 2 and forgets 3 again. You go because gravity is easier to agree with than men. Cold takes you fast, a smarter animal than heat, and the pressure tightens your head like a band you didn't earn. You level at the lip, where coral antlers reach into a blue that's too honest about depth. The light slices tall and merciless. Every bubble looks like a coin you won't get paid. You work the undercut, knife finding old hinges, basket bumping stone, faithful as a debt. An octopus the colour of afternoon decides to be rock until it doesn't, then pours itself into a hole and forgets you exist. Your chest warms in that awful creeping way, a polite dinner guest who begins moving furniture, and you let it, because fighting is how boys forget up from down. Leto taps twice, shift right. You do, and a thread of current knifes the silt off the shelf into the drop like smoke abandoning a fire. You overstay by 1 heartbeat because the oyster is stubborn, and your pride is cheaper than time. The surface punishes you for the decision. Halfway up, the drums in your ears play while your vision thins at the edges, a grey lace, pretty and stupid. You pause on a jut, hug it like a friend you owe, and count backward from a number that pretends to be bigger than it is. Somewhere above, the rope tells a story in your palm about the foreman leaning, the boat slanting, Leto's weight shifting as he climbs clear. You push off again, arm slow, leg slower, and the light breaks over you like gossip. Too bright from the wrong angle, everyone already told. Air soars into you, sour and metallic, and the foreman snorts that you breathe like a dog with opinions. On deck, the man in the sash watches the bowl and not the hands that fill it. He turns a small pearl like a thought and calls it modest. He calls your bleeding wrapping convenient. He calls Leto efficient, and Leto pretends the word is a kind of money. You drink from the dipper and it hits your stomach like a thrown rock. The hiccup climbs your throat and tastes of rope and last night's stew. The sun has teeth again. The deck holds heat the way your stories hold mistakes. The wind smells faintly of copra from up the coast, sweet sour, a reminder that other people work on land and get to keep the ground beneath their feet. The foreman slaps your shoulder, part warning, part inventory, and tells you to change stones. The heavier one is making you thoughtful. You drop with the smaller weight and the sea decides you should be farther left. You oblige because arguing with water is like arguing with debt. A fine hobby if you weren't living in it. A cut under your big toe opens on coral and sings its one-note song. You file the pain like a receipt and keep working. Jelly threads brush your cheek and the sting comes with a clean spite that travels across your face like a note being copied. You don't scratch. You don't have the fingers to spare. An eel mouths the edge of your basket, and you show it the knife's idiom. It chooses literacy and withdraws. Your chest heats. Your head scolds. Your hands keep their ugly grace. When you finally tug, the rope replies so late you see the thought of fainting and ask it to visit later. You climb without hurrying because boys who hurry get remembered by mothers who don't forgive boats. Afternoon finds teeth in the tide and chews the hull with them. The sash man trades 3 small pearls for promises about tomorrow and smokes something clove sweet that makes the flies nostalgic. Leto laughs at a joke you didn't hear, and the foreman laughs because he's still here too. You shuck under the awning while the big boat rolls and the lamp swings like a conscience. Pearls are moons only when they want credit. Most are pebbles that learn to shine where no one could enjoy them. Your thumb stops being your only opinion. Your knees write letters to your future back. The bowl gathers small hopes that look too alike to deserve different prices. The sash man shrugs and says volume. You think of rice measured in handfuls and decide you believe in volume too. By the time you beach the boat, the sun's gone sullen and the smell ashore is laundry and smoke and children who ate first. Your mother has that cough again, the one she folds into the pot so it will boil faster, and your sister says the schoolteacher wants coins for a book that smells like rain. You lay your 1 coin on the mat, and it looks like a joke told by a god with better hobbies. You say tomorrow will be more. You say the big boat promised. You say things men say when girls are listening. Night presses in, heat sticky, geckos knocking out their dusty clucks on the beams, and you lie down with your hand under your cheek and the sea still in your ears like a neighbour you can't evict. You tell your lungs to be cheaper. They never listen. Morning smells like wet rope and old ginger, and your joints behave like doors in a house no one oiled. The foreman's whistle says hurry while his eyes say replaceable. You chew a heel of rice cake gone to rock and call it breakfast, then check the thumb wrap, stain the brown of broken promises, and rub a little coconut oil into the cracks at your knuckles until they shine like small, hopeful beetles. Leto ties your stone like he's restraining a bad thought. The sash man is already counting bowls that don't exist yet. He tells the foreman today is a test and tells the sky to stay clear as if it takes orders. The sky blinks and pretends to consider it. You step onto the plank and the plank remembers every other pair of feet that asked it not to break. The sea is a stiff shirt this morning, flat and formal, with small wrinklings where wind practices. You go down into it the way a coin agrees to a jar, quickly with quiet argument, and the cold wraps your head like a cloth dipped in old tea. The reef lip yawns into blue, and you have the sudden fool urge to laugh, because it will cost breath and that will teach you better than any proverb. Work arranges your hands without consulting you. Knife here, basket there, fingers curled so the hinge catches skin and not pride. A sting brushes your calf like a lie you wish were true. You file it under later. 2 shells cough. 1 refuses. 1 comes apart in your palm so neatly it feels like love. On your 3rd drop, the rope slicks across your shoulder wrong and bites at the old burn. You swear in a whisper because sound travels odd here, and you don't want to buy anyone else's trouble. A sweeping school of surgeonfish writes slanted grey sentences that you can't read. A single remora ghosts along with you like a cousin who wants to borrow money. The light stands in spears, and the sand seems to smoke where your knees disturb it, the cloud wanting to be a curtain and failing. You pry 4 more, then 5, and the first sharp pinch of air hunger pries you. You go up steady, arms a little lazy by design, and imagine the foreman pacing out your breaths like coins in his head. The deck again, heat that steps on you, salt drying into a second skin that doesn't fit. The sashman pronounces 2 pearls acceptable and 1 shy, which is a personality he invented for money. Leto pretends not to enjoy the word acceptable, then ruins the pretending by grinning at nothing in particular. You drink, spill, cough, and the foreman tells you the water barrel is not a lagoon for boys to practice drowning in. The rope singes your palm when you pay it out, and it leaves its own handwriting on your skin. Loops and cross strokes you can read by pain. Somewhere inland, a church bell tries to tidy the morning into hours. The sea ignores it, and you follow the sea's example. By noon, the current sneaks from the channel and begins leaning on everyone. A slow, rude cousin putting weight on your shoulder. You add a palm-sized stone, and the descent remembers fairness. Your ears complain like old men, and you bribe them with a swallow that tastes of tin and yesterday's stew. A jackfish shears past, and you see your face bent and silly in its side for a blink. You wedge into a pocket where the coral has built a bad room and find a run of shells fat as fists. 2 are welded with age and your knife skates, whispering dark promises about the skin on your knuckles. You bite your tongue, lift with the heel of your hand, and something in your wrist ticks like a small clock learning a new word. The shark returns as an afterthought, a long grey parenthesis sliding open, sliding shut. Leto answers with boredom, which sharks hate. He cracks an oyster and clouds the water with its sweet, and the grey parenthesis decides to find better punctuation. You tug the line once, and someone above sighs into the rope with you. Halfway up, the heat in your chest puts its feet on the table, and your vision folds at the corners like wet paper. You flatten to a lip, count slow, blow a ribbon of air that looks like beads fleeing a string, and go again. Surface smacks you with light and noise and the taste of a nail. The foreman says your timing is close to interesting, and you should stop that. Afternoon wants to be a rumour of storm and never commits. You shuck under the tarp, slapping flies that learned your face yesterday, and each shell powders your forearms until they look dusted in chalk that stings when you sweat. Pearls drop into the rag bowl like tame moons, small, round, smug, and the sash man pretends to be underwhelmed because underwhelmed pays. Leto tells a story about a boy who claimed he could smell a pearl through a closed shell and then walked into a post. The foreman says he married rich. You smile because smiling uses fewer muscles than arguing, and because your jaw hurts from clenching around nothing all day. By late afternoon, the reef has learned your name and begun mispronouncing it on purpose. The swell lifts and drops the hull with a bored authority that sends tools skittering, and the sashman has stopped pretending the bowl is a miracle and started treating it like a ledger. You grease the clip, cough up a thread of old salt that tastes like a metal cup, and slide over the side before the foreman can bless you with advice. Water grabs your ribs with cool hands, the cold drills tidy holes behind your sinuses. The rope finds yesterday's chafe and writes over it in thicker strokes. Down past the coin-bright fish, past curtains of weed that fray in the surge, you level at the lip where the reef throws its shadow into honest blue. The stone pulls like a boring cousin, and you let it, because arguments are expensive and lungs are already in debt. At the lip you meet a forest of antler coral packed tight as bad teeth, silt sleeping in the pockets, the oyster mouths furred grey with age like grumpy uncles. You work by touch more than sight, because the light stands in tall prison bars and the fish keep drafting shadows that look like decisions. The jelly thread writes its clean sting across your cheek and your eyes water without permission. You wedge, twist, steal, and the shell says a wet no that turns to a small grunt yes when the hinge remembers it's just meat. Your thumb throbs under the wrap in that steady, insulting beat that suggests you should have chosen a different century. Halfway up, a pressure dent bites your left ear and the world tilts, a lazy room turning. You stop because stopping is cheaper than fainting, flatten your palm to the rock, and hum through your nose until the drum in your head remembers rhythm. When you surface, the boat looks farther than math would allow, and the air tastes of oil and rain that hasn't fallen yet. The foreman asks if you plan on inventing a new way to breathe. You tell him you're auditioning. Leto snorts, ties your stone tighter than friendship, and says, "Don't be interesting." Interesting boys get remembered for the wrong reasons. Next run, Kiko goes down 2 beats before you, skinny and earnest, a knife so short it's practically a threat against himself. You see his rope flutter wrong in the surge, and then the frantic tug-tug that means a not learned bad habits. You dive on memory, ears biting, lungs already insulted. Kiko's eyes are wide as dinner plates, his ankle tangled, the stone sulking against a ledge like a lazy dog. You cut the loop, kick the stone clear, and shove the basket up with your forearm, while Kiko remembers that listening to water is different from arguing with it. The reef sneers sand into your nose. Your chest answers with sparks that feel like moths trapped in a jar. You ride him up like cargo, hand under his armpit, his kicks learning manners, your own chest buzzing with that moth-wing static that means you are borrowing seconds with terrible interest. Surface breaks open and all the noises rush in, gulls, rope talk, the foreman's voice sanding you down. They drag Kiko in like wet laundry. The foreman hangs him over a knee and beats water out of him with a palm as if it owes rent. No one calls it rescue. They call it work continuing. Kiko coughs a string of salt and a curse his mother would admire, then laughs too hard, then cries a little, which is all the same thing in this trade. The sash man looks bored by survival. He asks about volume, shucking under the tarp afterward. Your hands cramp into claws that need prying apart. The lamp breathes its thin breath and paints the meat pearly and obscene, and the smell sets up a small room in your nose you can't evict. The bowl collects hard moons, soft almosts, and a lot of wet nothing. The sash man calls them modest again and pays like modest men tip. Leto tells Kiko to tie his knots like he ties his lies, short and easy to undo. The foreman says tomorrow is deeper, which is how men say the same day is coming back in a different shirt. You smear ginger on the thumb and it burns clean, a line of fire that tells the cut to stand up straight. Evening pulls the colour out of the water and out of you. Your legs feel hollow as bamboo, and your back complains in a dialect you didn't know you spoke. The beach stinks honest, smoke, fish, old rope, boys, and the sky wears bruises in purple and green. The sash man folds his ledger face and calls the take serviceable, which is not how rice cooks. The foreman flicks you 1 coin, and Leto 2 and Kiko 1 and a lecture. The coin is warm and greasy and feels heavier than its hunger, which is the saddest trick money knows. You tuck it where you keep hooks and promises and head for the path that remembers your feet. Home tastes of ginger and apology. Your mother's cough is smaller tonight, which is a lie you decide to believe because belief is cheaper than medicine. Your sister holds up a schoolbook that smells like mildew and rain, its pages soft as old bread, and asks you to write your name in it because the teacher says names need practice. Your hand shakes, the letters come out like fish hooks, and she claps anyway. You lie down on the mat with the sea still walking around in your ears and tell your lungs to stop counting. They refuse, polite as debt, relentless as tide. Sleep arrives like a thief who forgets to be quiet. Every time you start to drop, a calf muscle knots into a stone and jerks you back to the room. You grit through it, rub salt grit off your shin, and count breaths like poor men count coins. A lot of touching, not much spending. The night sweats even with the window propped. Geckos clicking like cheap clocks while the roof ticks with leftover heat. You catch yourself holding air like a miser holds silver and let it go. Slow, because even in sleep you don't get paid for hoarding. Somewhere, late, the foreman's whistle visits your dream like a ghost with office hours. When dawn finally edges the window in tin light, you're already awake, mouth tasting of rope and rain, body listing like a boat that forgot its tide. Dawn misses its cue and shows late, grey and sulking, and the foreman decides the sun's punctuality is your problem. Your thumb smells faintly sour under the wrap, a warning written in skin, and a red thread has crept up your wrist like a nosy aunt. You rub ginger on it because medicine is for people who can afford to be sick. Breakfast is rice gone stubborn and a gulp of water that tastes like a roof nail. Your stomach mutters about dignity and you ignore it. Leto checks your knots with the authority of a priest who knows you'll sin anyway. Kiko stands close as if proximity can teach stamina. The sash man counts an invisible bowl and says volume 3 times, which is almost a prayer if you're the kind of god who likes wet coins. The sea wears last night's wind like a wrinkled shirt and pretends it's fine. You grease the clip, sniff the rope that still smells of mildew and men, and step off into a cold that bites with neat accountant teeth. Pressure palms your face, your ears rise to argue, then give up with small sulks. The reef lip yawns into its blue sermon, and you slip under the ledge where silt sleeps, and oysters hunker in their rude pews. A jelly veil drifts against your cheek and writes a clean sting that brings tears without drama. You file it with the rest of today's paperwork. Your basket taps your hip. The stone tugs honest, and your chest warms in layers like someone keeps adding wet blankets. Halfway through the run, the old net appears out of the blue like a bad rumour. Its fibres furred with algae, its knots stiff with other people's mistakes. It kisses your forearm, then remembers to loop, and suddenly your wrist belongs to history. You still, knife low, lungs writing, hot little letters, and work the twine with the patience of a thief. The net tightens when you fight and loosens when you pretend not to care. Like men. You slide a loop off your thumb, peel another from the basket handle, and nick a third at the knot. Dull blade whispering promises your skin would prefer you keep. When you're clear, you inventory the seconds you set on fire and kick for the shelf with the deliberate insult of a boy who survived a lesson and refuses to thank the teacher. On deck, the sash man pronounces 3 pearls promising and 2 shy and 1 uncooperative as if money had manners. The foreman translates promising to rope burn and shy to lighter stones for you, heavier for Leto. Fairness is defined by someone else's pockets. Your shoulders ache like they've been chewed. Your hands smell like iodine and old breath. Your mouth tastes of tin. Kiko asks if the net felt like hair and you tell him it felt like debt. He laughs too hard and the foreman finds him a look that costs energy to pay. You drink warm water until your stomach argues and the hiccup climbs your throat like a crab. You swallow it back with your pride. Afternoon fattens the swell. Lazy humps that lift the hull and set it down with the patience of a bored god. The wind tastes green from the mangroves. Lightning scratches the western sky in white chalk that hurts to admire. The foreman says 1 more set because weather is always almost later. You go because arguing is a hobby for dry people. Down in the chopped light, the reef yawns and the oysters refuse to be improved by your intentions. A shark writes itself into the scene. Grammar mark you don't need, and Leto answers by cracking meat and letting sweetness cloud the water the way a bribe clouds judgment. The shark edits itself out. Your chest lights its fuse again. You rise without drama because drama gets funerals and funerals cost. The squall lands hard, a wet sheet thrown by a strong hand. Rain needles the deck until it bounces. The mast croons its worried song. The sail slaps like laundry in an argument. You and Kiko bail with half a gourd each while Leto leans on the tiller like he's wrestling an older brother. The air smells of bruised leaves and hot iron. The water tastes like all the roofs in the world. The boat flexes underfoot, a rib taking a punch, and every line creaks old opinions. For a bright second the sky goes white and you can see the bone of the wave you're about to wear. It hits dumb and heavy and you swallow the ocean's joke. The foreman laughs once, short, unhelpful, human, and shouts the kind of directions that make sense only after you've survived them. Evening finds you on the beach with legs that feel borrowed, and a back that wants to negotiate a separate peace. The village smells like charcoal and broth and wet dogs. Smoke threads your hair and refuses to leave. You shuck under the lean-to, lamp coughing, flies practicing loyalty, and the meat slides into the scoop with that obscene lovely slurp. A small pearl rolls into your palm, heavy as a promise you shouldn't believe. The foreman plucks it like an idea, polishes it on a rag that used to be a shirt, and drops it into the bowl with the sound of decisions. Coins appear in his hand and vanish into pockets with the same speed. Yours arrive slower and arrive fewer. You don't argue. Arguments don't boil rice. You take the 1 coin and the lie that tomorrow is generous. Home offers soup thin as gossip and rice that clumps like stubborn friends. Your mother's cough scrapes less tonight, either mercy or silence, and your sister holds up her book and asks you to write your name again, because names harden if you don't stir them. Your letters come out steadier, still ugly, still yours. The mat remembers your weight with a soft complaint. The roof ticks, geckos stamp their dusty applause. You lay the coin beside your head like a guard that can't fight and press your bandaged thumb under your cheek to restart the stubborn pulse. The sea keeps walking the walls of your skull, patient as tax. Tomorrow is the same job in a different shirt. You close your eyes anyway. Dawn shows up yawning and damp, and your thumb's red thread has climbed another knuckle. Like a vine that doesn't believe in roofs, it throbs in its wrap with a low, spoiled heat, and you tell it the ocean is cold and will fix its attitude. The foreman whistles the way men pray when they've misplaced reverence, and the sash man answers with volume like a belligerent echo. Breakfast is boiled rice pretending to be stones and a sip of roof water that tastes like frog and iron, and your stomach signs the receipt without reading the total. Kiko practices knots as if you can lasso mercy, and Leto stares at the shelf line like a man considering a cliff and deciding he's already fallen. You grease the clip with spit and leftover stubbornness, pull the rope around your hips until the old chafe recognizes you, and step onto the plank. The day smells like hot wood and old knives and the kind of thunder that hasn't made up its mind yet, which means everyone else has decided for it. The first fall steals heat from your fever the way officials steal coins, impersonal, efficient, and never enough to notice. Cold palms your skull, pressure thumbs your nose, and your ears argue a case they've already lost. Light pencils into columns that can't hold anything upright, and sand smokes where your knee brushes a ledge, the cloud drifting down shelf like gossip looking for a face. A manta passes like a quiet sermon, its edges stitched with small fish rehearsing bravery, and for 3 beats your chest forgets the business it's in. The stone tugs with a bored insistence, the basket bumps your hip like a sleepy dog asking for the same answer. You fit the knife to a hinge, feel the muscle think about disagreeing, and give it the kind of patience that is really spite with better manners. You ride the ledge rightward, and the current leans you into a room the reef built wrong, a pocket where ropes of old net have snagged and learned the shape of water. The fibres stroke your shin with a familiarity you refuse, and when they decide to remember how to loop, you show them the knife, dull and sure, and they forget again. Your thumb peels its little bell of pain each time you twist. The wrap slips and the ginger sting returns like someone tattling. An eel as thick as your wrist yawns the slow, silver yawn of a bored uncle, and opens just enough to offer unearned advice. You decline by pretending not to exist. Breath warms behind your ribs in that creeping way that feels like a blanket becoming a door, and you count down work the way the poor men count coins, quickly, quietly, too aware of the air left over. When you break the surface, the wind has sharpened, and the boat talks in louder wood, a creak that sounds like old men standing. The sash man squints at the bowl as if pearls are misbehaving children. The foreman counts mouths without counting names. A stranger waits under the awning, a thin man with a ledger and a shirt too white for this beach, who smells like bay leaf and rules. He's not a priest and not a buyer. He's the kind of man who collects anything that can be counted and calls it law. His smile is a measuring device. He inquires about licenses in a voice that doesn't expect answers and recommends a fee sized exactly like your day. The foreman laughs in the red spit and coins. The sash man frowns in arithmetic, and you drink warm water until your stomach remembers pride and sends some back for review. Afternoon pulls its shoulders up and the chop tightens, short and mean, and the reef's outer lip shows its teeth. You go again because coin and habit look identical in this light. Midway down the water turns grainy with bubbles, a boil from a crack where the swell pushes mischief, and your chest misreads it as air and reaches for it like a fool. You correct yourself by swallowing salt and pride, and the correction hurts clean. The jack slashes past, trailing a remora bored enough to judge you. The stone kisses the shelf and sulks. You pry 3, then 5, then 1 that refuses until you threaten it with patience. Your calf pops a small cramp like a pebble in a shoe you can't remove, and you smooth it with a slow kick that tells the muscle you see it and you don't care. The storm arrives in pieces. First a dark seam stitched low along the horizon, then a wind that smells green and dirty, then the sudden white slap of rain like handfuls of beans thrown against the deck. The mast hums a complaint your teeth answer. The foreman shouts the sort of instructions that are really confessions. Pull, tie, bail, don't think. Leto rides the tiller with his knees and curses like prayer. Kiko bails with both hands and still manages to be ankle-deep in proof that the sky is generous. A wave squares itself and climbs aboard without permission. The boat flexes like a rib under a boot. For an unkind second, you picture the rope parting like gossip and the stone choosing to be the smartest thing you own. It doesn't. You bail the boat and yourself in the same rhythm and teach the rain not to be impressed. When the worst of it passes, the beach is a line of wet roofs and smoke that refuses to learn humility. The sash man has retreated under an oiled cloth like a secret, and the ledger fellow has vanished, which is the trick laws play when weather starts discussing honesty. You shuck by lantern, with hands that belong to someone older, meat slurping into the scoop, flies returning to their vocation. A pearl rolls into your palm fat as a thumb knuckle, and you feel, for half a treacherous breath, the small gravity of it tug at the corners of your face. You pass it up, the bowl accepts without gratitude. The foreman announces rope wear and rain damage, and pockets both problems until they turn into his solutions. You count your cuts and decide you've collected enough today. Night brings stewed ginger and the sound of buckets emptying themselves, and your mother says the cough is leaving the house by the back door. You pretend to see it go. Your sister reads from her soft book in a careful whisper, letters shaped like bent fishhooks, and asks you to write yours again. Your name looks too sharp on the page, like a tool you aren't licensed to own. You lie down with the sea still pacing the rafters, and your thumb dreaming hot, and the day files itself away where days go when they don't end, only stop. You tell the dark that tomorrow can be smaller if it wants. The dark tells you to bring your lungs and something you don't mind losing. Morning lifts like a wet mat and drops back on your shoulders, and the thumb sends its quiet telegram up your arm, hot, sour, persistent, while the wrap smells like old tea and the inside of a shoe. The foreman's whistle heckles the alley. The sash man is already a ledger with legs. Kiko shows up chewing a palm sugar chip like courage. Lito ties your line in a knot so tight it squeaks, then ties his own like a dare. You swallow rice that crunches as if the pot learned pride. Sip roof water that tastes like iron and frogs, and the beach leans around you with its usual mix of smoke, beetle spit and fish oil reheated to suggestion. The sea looks calm in the way a held breath looks calm. The foreman points to the outer lip and says depth like it's a prayer. The rope hugs your hips like debt and teaches your skin a new alphabet. First drop is a cold slap clean enough to make you think better thoughts for 3 heartbeats. Then the pressure finds your face and sits on it, thumb behind the nose, steady argument at the jaw hinges. Light turns into tall bars no one filed. Sand puffs where your knee brushes the shelf. A soft explosion drifting down slope like gossip searching for an ear. The stone tugs with that bored insistence you know too well. Oysters sulk in their rude pews, lips furred grey. The hinges the colour of old promises. Knife in, twist. Patience that is spite pretending to be virtue, and the shell sighs its small surrender. Your bandage loosens, ginger sting returns, and you decide to call it a friend since it insists on visiting. A barracuda writes a silver insult across your periphery and is gone before your pride can answer. On the third set, the line snags at your ankle like yesterday's mistake come back for overtime. You stop because stopping is cheaper than fainting, fingers working blind in the cold blue grammar you've learned. Feed the loop back through its own bad idea. Thumb the lay. Don't argue. Don't hurry. Don't give panic the courtesy of eye contact. Your chest warms like somebody adding wet blankets. A jelly thread writes a precise sentence along your cheek and your eyes water without asking permission. You take 2 shells quick and 1 stupidly slow because pride is a poor man's watch. The rope hums from above with Lito's weight shifting. The boat a dark thought. The foreman leaning into your breath count like he's owed it. You rise steady because steady is cheaper than interesting. Surface arrives with the flavour of nail and smoke. The ledger man is on deck again with his white shirt and bay leaf breath, testing the word fee on his tongue like a coin he plans to keep. He talks about licenses in a voice that already issued one and about quotas in a tone that thinks it invented arithmetic. The sashman folds his mouth around the word volume like it's tobacco. The foreman agrees with whatever pays today. You drink warm barrel water, the colour of old tin, and it hits your stomach like a pebble you can't spit out. Lito's grin is a knife he forgot to sheath. Kiko asks if licenses keep sharks polite, and you tell him paper tastes bad to fish. The ledger man smiles the way doors close. The next bell is a spanner on a cleat. You grease the clip and go before thoughts decide to unionize. Afternoon leans teeth into the tide. The outer lip breathes harder. The blue below it becomes a long idea with too many commas, and the stone insists on being faith and punishment at once. You work the undercut, knife-nicking knuckles, slime cold as apology, the basket bumping your hip like a sleepy dog with opinions. A reef shark writes a grey parenthesis into the scene, and Leto opens an oyster with his heel and lets sweet clouded meat say hello. The parenthesis closes. Your calf mutters about cramp. You smooth it with slow as kicks that refuse to notice. When you tug the rope, it answers late as always. You count to 5, then lie to yourself about the number of strokes to surface because lies are light and oxygen is not. The boat appears like a bad promise kept. The squall arrives tidier than yesterday, a curtain pulled briskly across a window. Rain stung in straight lines, a wind that smells of mangrove leaf and fresh dirt, the mast humming at a frequency your teeth remember. Kiko bails, Leto leans, the foreman argues with angles. You scoop water with a half gourd until your shoulders light small fires. A wave climbs on without knocking, and leaves you ankle deep in proof the sky is not a gentleman. For a heartbeat you picture the rope parting and the stone having the first good idea of its life. It doesn't, maybe out of respect for the audience. The squall passes the way rich men pass through markets, leaving you wet and priced, but not improved. The sashman emerges dry under his oiled cloth and asks about volume like weather. We'll invoice him. Night hands you the lean-to and the lamp that coughs, light the colour of old honey. You shuck until the smell is a room you live in. Brine, iodine. That meat sweet that could be fruit if it didn't steal your appetite. Pearls drop into the rag bowl like tame moons. Most shells give only wet, lovely nothing. The foreman counts in a rhythm that sounds like a man patting himself down for lost kindness. He declares ropeware again and pockets it before anyone recognises themselves in the word. Your coin arrives warm with someone else's sweat and perfectly the wrong weight. Home tastes of ginger and resignation. Your sister presses the soft book into your hands and asks for the letters. You draw hooks and bones and she smiles like the sea forgave you. You sleep with your bandaged hand under your cheek, the pulse a small hammer, and the sea walking your skull like a landlord who has his own key. Morning is a wet rag slapped across your face and called weather, and the thumb's red thread has climbed to the wrist bone with the quiet confidence of vine on a post. Your mother eyes it and mutters about boiled bark, about soaking rags and salt and hope. She ties the wrap tighter, the knot small and mean, and tells you not to bleed where you eat. The foreman's whistle scrapes the alley, and you shoulder rope that has learned all your soft places by name. Down the beach a new hull sits smug and fat, painted bright, mast tall, a borrowed miracle. The sashman strokes it like a pet he intends to starve. He says the outer drop holds black-lipped shells that owe him a debt. Says boys who swim straight make the tide look lazy. Leto spits and says straight is a word rich men use when they forget about current. You grease the clip and don't ask what forgetting feels like. The paddle out is hard-tacked. Oars slap, bamboo sighs, the hull's wet ribs speak in creaks like old men changing stools. The horizon blinks and becomes a line that might be weather or mercy. Either way, it looks expensive. The outer drop shows as a green that remembers to be blue too quickly. A cliff of water masquerading as a calm thought. Your wrap itches, the ginger sting is a yesterday sermon, still boring. Kiko sits forward, knees sharp, eager teeth worrying a scrap of dried cassava. The foreman says volume while he counts the mouths that will divide it. The sashman promises a bonus if you bring up lips thick as a thumb. You translate bonus to heavier stone and fewer opinions. Leto taps your shoulder and says, keep your body small, keep your lies smaller. The hull tilts to the swell and you smell mangrove breath carried far, sweet green and not for you. Water takes you like always, except colder and more deliberate. A clerk checking your debts twice. The drop is sudden. One heartbeat you're in a green room with walls, the next you're leaning over a blue stairwell that never reaches a floor. You work the ledge, knees brushing lace coral that pretends to be delicate until it rakes skin. The knife finds a lip, the hinge remembers bark meat, and your bandage loosens to announce itself with a clean, salt-borne burn. The current nudges, then insists, left, left, I said left, and you compromise into a seam under an overhang. That's where the surge lives, a muscle that flexes without manners. It shoves the basket against a coral knob and wedges you there. rope rubbing your hip raw in a hot stripe. You go still because still is cheaper than stupid. Leto's shadow ghosts close, knife flicking, hand on the basket frame, a rolled wrist that unhooks the world. Free. Your chest has opinions, you don't. On deck, the ledger man has brought a friend who smells like bay leaf and rust, Constable wearing a grin that's all license and no teeth. He carries a musket wood-warped by humidity, and a book of paper dry enough to catch fire on a look. He asks the foreman for signatures in a voice that expects wet thumbprints, then talks about tax on shells, tax on pearls, tax on the air, the boys warm between dives. The sash man performs piety with coins, the foreman performs rage with spit. Both pay like men who expect to be paid back by someone else's lungs. You drink warm barrel water that tastes like the inside of a nail and feel it hit your belly like judgment. Kiko whispers that the musket looks tired. Leto says tired weapons are honest about their interest in work. The constable scratches a note and calls it law. The bell clangs, you go, because gravity hasn't learned to read. Afternoon drags its knuckles across the tide and the reef breathes faster, as if the whole ocean ran the stairs. You take the smaller stone and the current laughs, carries you 3 body lengths off the lip before you can argue diplomacy. A jack carves past with 2 remoras stuck like bad ideas. A reef shark writes a grey bracket into the scene and waits for someone to place a sentence between. You work a fat old shell from under a lip with patient malice, and it comes away with a sigh that feels personal. When you surface, the sashman rolls a small pearl in his fingers like a lie he intends to spend. He calls it promising, and the foreman calls your pace shy. Leto lifts his basket and 3 pairs of nacre wink like moons, pretending to be stones. His grin's bright and brief, a match struck and immediately blown out. You chew a lump of rice until it becomes a taste called effort. By lantern under the lean-to, shucking turns to arithmetic you can smell, meat sweet sliding, iodine loud in your nose, flies like punctuation you can't proof away. Your thumb hums with heat and the red line shines under damp cloth. An old woman with beetle teeth and eyes like wet wood arrives with a bundle of bark and orders that sound like kindness kicking you in the shins. She boils a tea that tastes of floor and forest and makes you drink until your tongue is a guest in its own mouth. She swabs the red with something that smells like sap and punishment and says, sleep, which is a word people with roofs use too easily. The foreman counts pearls by lamp, coins by feel, and rope wear by imagination. Your coin comes late and leaves quickly, the way good advice does. You tuck it where you keep hooks and willpower, and watch the bowl eat moons. Home is boiled rice and fish that tastes like the pan tried. Your mother coughs into the corner and says the bark woman's been right before. Your sister reads you a paragraph about boats that never sink because the men who wrote the book never left their desks. Her finger tracks the line like a tiny oar, and when she stumbles over your name she looks at you as if you're a word with too many hooks. You write it again on a scrap, letters crooked as reef, and she nods solemnly as if that will stop the tide. The roof sweats, geckos click like cheap clocks. The mat remembers your shape with a complaint. You tuck your bandaged hand beneath your cheek and feel the pulse thud like a small hammer trying to learn mercy. Outside, rain rehearses on distant leaves and decides to wait until your next dive. Night is hot enough to argue. You doze in slices, wake to your calf knotting into stone, press it out with the kind of patience you've been practicing on oysters. The bark tea rides your stomach like a rude guest. Your head feels woolly, light moving slow behind your eyes as if the lamp forgot its oil. You breathe in 4, out 6, the way Leto taught you for the long returns, and tell your lungs they're employees, not artists. The sea walks your ceiling with soft feet. Somewhere a dog finds the only bone left in the province and makes a thesis of it. You promise yourself you'll dive careful tomorrow, which is a joke boys tell before breakfast. You sleep anyway, because tomorrow collects what you owe whether you're rested or not. Dawn shows up with a hangover and brings you its breath, warm, mould-sour, honest, and your thumb's red vine has pushed past the wrist like it paid the toll. The barkwoman's tea sits in your stomach like a guest who won't leave. Your head feels wrapped in a damp cloth that used to be clean. The foreman whistles in the key of debt. The sashman counts imaginary bowls while the ledgerman practices a smile that could file taxes. Leto ties your stone like he's muzzling a dog. Kiko chews palm sugar and tries to look fearless. The beach is all smoke and wet rope and boys. You grease the clip, pull the rope up under the bruise on your hip, and step onto the plank that still remembers yesterday's feet like a bad memory sanded smooth. The outer lip wears its mean face. You drop through clean cold that becomes a coin in your mouth, heavy and metallic, and the pressure sits on your ears like a cat deciding whether you matter. The reef opens its crooked teeth and you find the seam under the ledge, silt puffing like flour, oysters sulking in grey fur. Knife, twist, small surrender, basket bumping your hip like a sleepy dog with bills due. Your thumb throbs in a polite, poisonous way. The wrap loosens and the ginger sting returns like a scolded cousin. A ray slips by with its choir of fish, and for 3 breaths your chest forgets its job. Then work remembers you. Third drop, you chase Leto along the long shelf where the current leans like a rude uncle. He points with the knife, under, there, and you wedge shoulder and knee into a pocket that smells of old slime and newer mistakes. A loop of abandoned rope strokes your calf with the intimacy of debt. You ignore it until it remembers to tighten. You feed it its own tail, thumbs working the lay like you're braiding a lie into sense. Your lungs warm where the wet blankets stack. You count in the way poor men count coins, quickly hoping not to see the bottom. The basket ticks coral, the stone sulks. You rise because arguments cost air. On deck, the constable has brought a friend with a book of fines and boots that can't tell wet from law. He wants names spelled like coins. You offer yours as hooks and bones, and he writes it wrong on purpose. The sashman pays theatrics in copper and keeps the silver dry. The foreman spits red and calls it negotiation. You drink barrel water that tastes like roof and nail, and it hits your stomach like a slapped gourd. Kiko whispers that men who write in dry books think water is a rumour. Leto says rumours drown slower than boys. The bell becomes a spanner again. You go because gravity isn't waiting. The current fattens in the afternoon and begins to move furniture. You switch to a lighter stone, it does not care. The ledge breathes harder, blue sliding up into the green, and your ears complain like it's old men inventing weather. Under the overhang, the surge grabs the basket and shoves it into a coral knot. You wedge the frame free with your wrist, and the hinge kisses your knuckle sharp and neat. Warmth blooms, iron on the tongue by rumour. You keep the knife and your lie about time. A small reef shark writes itself into the room, and Leto feeds it boredom and meat. It edits itself out. You rise slow because flashy boys get remembered and funerals charge extra. Shucking under the tarp later, your hands cramp into claws and your forearms wear a chalk of shell dust that stings when you sweat. The lamp coughs honey light. Meat slides and slurps. Flies hold their stubborn mass around your ears. A pearl rolls into your palm and it is heavier than belief deserves. You pass it to the bowl, which receives it like a rich man's gratitude. The ledgerman inspects, calls it serviceable, writes a number that isn't the truth. The foreman counts coins with fingers still red at the edges and announces rope wear with the joy of a man inventing weather. You tuck your coin where you keep hooks and hunger. Home is bark tea and rice that clings in guilty lumps. Your mother presses a hot cloth on the red line, and the smell is leaf and punishment. Your sister reads a paragraph about rivers that never run dry, and you both decide the book is lying. You write your name again with letters like small knives. She flattens the page with a palm and says it looks like a real person. Night sweats. Geckos tick out their cheap applause. The mat remembers your shape with a complaint. You tuck the bandaged hand under your cheek and listen to the sea pace the roof like a landlord who knows when rent is due. Tomorrow wants your lungs, and a part of you won't miss until it's gone. Before light, the foreman beats a rhythm on the gunwale with a stick like he's waking the sea. And the sea wakes rude. Your head is woolly from bark tea. Your thumb is a hot coin under the wrap. Your breath tastes of old tin. The beach smells of smoke rinsed by dew and the iron tang of wet tools. A new buyer waits on the big boat, Spanish coat salt-flecked, hair oiled against honesty, voice careful around vowels. He talks of Manila, of shell luster, of gentlemen with shirts that never meet weather. He calls pearls tears of the moon, and then prices them like stones. You rehearse not laughing. The ledgerman nods as if men are arithmetic. Leto ties your stone and says, "Keep small." He says it like he's folding a prayer into your shirt. You drop into blue that tightened overnight, as if the channel slept badly and wants company. Pressure negotiates with your face. Your ears pay with small surrenders. The reef lip falls off sharper, the light climbing in tall bars that keep nothing in order. You work the undercut where black-lipped shells crouch in rude pews, hinges old as gossip. Knife in, twist, patience practiced until it looks like virtue. The basket bumps your hip. The stone tugs with its same old opinion. Your thumb peels its little bell. The wrap loosens, and the ginger returns with its clean scolding heat. A turtle drifts past with a jaw full of grass and a look that says your work is a private joke. Third set, trouble shows up dressed as your own rope. The line slides, kisses your shoulder, then remembers to loop. It tightens with the confidence of mistakes. You stop because stopping is how boys don't turn into stories told soft on beaches. The water is a loud hush. Your lungs heat like someone piling wet blankets. You work the loop the way a thief unpicks a lock. Back through, thumb the lay, flatter the knot for pretending to be clever. The stone thinks about sulking. You think about rice hot enough to forgive. When the rope remembers its manners, you plant a knee, pry 2 shells that wanted to outlive you, and rise at the steady boredom that keeps boys breathing. On deck, the Spanish coat inspects the bowl like a priest grading sins. He calls your best pearl provincial and Lito's miraculous, and then pays the difference in words. The foreman translates miracle into ropeware and provincial into you can lift more. The ledger man suggests a harvest tax, on shells, on pearls, on luck that dares show up in public, and the constable pretends not to enjoy the list. You drink water that tastes like a nail gone sentimental, and it lands in your belly like a thrown pebble. Kiko asks if men who call pearls moon tears know the sea. Lito says men who name things don't need to. The bell rings. You go because gravity is punctual. By noon the swell turns shouldered and the wind remembers teeth. The outer lip breathes like a man late to his own problem. You take the smaller stone, it laughs, slides you left, then farther left, until you land in a crease full of old net and new opinion. The fibres pet your shin, then decide to keep you. Knife patience low kicks that mutter about cramp. You peel yourself out of last year's mistake and pry 3 shells with a mean joy. Breath warms to red, then to a colour you don't name. You rise, steady and dull, because interesting boys get remembered, and mothers deserve forgetting less. Evening's lean-to smells like iodine and burned lamp and the meat sweet that has become a room you can't leave. Pearls drop into the rag bowl like tame moons, and the Spanish coat is bored with the sky. He leaves with his hat dry. The ledger man writes a number onto paper too clean for your day. The constable finds a fine in the word fine. The foreman counts rope wear like a religion. Your coin arrives late and light. You tuck it where hooks and willpower sleep. Lito offers you half a strip of dried mango, sun-hammered flat, and you let it melt because you want to remember sugars without owing it. Home is rice and a panfish that tastes like courage fried in old oil. Your mother pats the red line with cloth that smells like bark and leaf. Your sister reads about sailors who sleep on feathers, and you stare at the word sleep until it gives up. You write your name in the book again. The letters look steadier and still wrong. Night sweats and croaks, geckos clap dusty hands. You lay the bandaged hand under your cheek, listen to the sea rehearse roofs, and tell tomorrow to try his smaller teeth. It won't. You will go anyway. Dawn smells like wet rope and beetle, and your own worry. The red line has climbed to the crook of your elbow, a thin road with bad intentions. The bark woman clicks her tongue and smears more sap that bites like honesty. The foreman whistles the taxman's anthem. The ledger man polishes his clean paper with you. The sash man says today the shells are lower, richer, worth the fever they'll give you, and he says it like a man selling weather. Lito checks your knots. Kiko tucks a charm under his collar that is really a drilled shell with a string and a story attached. You grease the clip with spit and stubbornness. The plank remembers your feet the way a scar remembers the knife. The first fall takes the heat out of your fever and leaves the ache, which is honest of it. The pressure writes its usual letter behind your nose. Your ears answer in small sullen pops. At the lip the blue becomes vertical and the growth on the edge turns pale, where it sees too much light and not enough mercy. You wedge under a brow of coral, knife ready, basket lined with the smell of old algae. The shell mouths lurk, grey and furred, each hinge a quiet no that becomes a soft yes if you are patient in the right shape. Your thumb throbs inside its wrap like a small drummer paid in vinegar. A slick of glassfish pours like quick rain. An eel yaws its slow silver opinion and withdraws. On the third set, Leto taps you twice, right, and you slide along a ledge into a long hallway of blue. The current leans, your legs learn new math. You find a run of big shells tucked under a lip where the surge breathes wrong. You work them with petty malice. 1, then 2, then a third that refuses until you remember to stop hurrying. Breath warms behind your ribs. Your head fuzzes at the corners like paper left in damp. You tug the rope and the delay is late enough to taste. You pack the panic down like sand in a jar, kick the metronome you practice on bad nights, and rise at a polite boredom you had to invent for yourself. On deck, a man you don't know hovers by the bowl. Coat cheap moors. Sewn to look dear, eyes sharp, fingers clean. He calls himself a broker and calls you boys the small fish. He offers to buy you futures in words and buys the pearls with coins you won't see all of. The sash man performs a fence that ends in a handshake. The foreman performs dignity that ends in ropeware. You drink water that tastes like history and nails, and it settles in your stomach like a hard mood. Kiko asks Leto if futures can be eaten. Leto says everything turns into rice if you suffer it long enough. Afternoon brings a change in the wind that tastes of rain uphill, leaves bruised into scent. The swell stacks shorter. The mast hums with the kind of note your teeth hate. You go because tomorrow charges interest for time you don't put in today. Under the lip, the surge gets grabby. It bumps your basket into a knob and your wrist into the hinge, and blood writes its thin red grammar in the water. A grey bracket slides into the hallway. Leto cracks meat with his heel and lets Sweet Cloud say please. The bracket closes. Your chest suggests a dumb sprint. You choose the slow arithmetic that keeps mothers from hating boats louder than they already do. By lamp under the lean-to, meat slurps into the scoop, shell grit powders your forearms into chalk that stings where sweat writes lines. A pearl rolls into your palm the size of your smallest finger joint, and you feel its weight like a suggestion. The broker pronounces it marketable. He pronounces your hands inconvenient. Coins arrive late and light, the way advice does. The bark woman peers at your arm, nods at the bad road climbing, and brews a tea that tastes of bark and consequences. It burns going in and warms like shame. Home is rice tamped into small bricks and soup that smells of leaf and trying. Your mother coughs less quietly. Your sister reads a paragraph about a city with lamps that don't smoke, and you both squint at the thought. You write your name again and the letters sit a little straighter. The page wrinkles under your damp hand like water wanting its alphabet back. You sleep with the bandage under your cheek and the sea walking the beams with quiet feet, and you tell tomorrow to take smaller bites. Tomorrow writes back with a whistle. Before day breaks, the wind changes its mind twice and the lagoon wrinkles like a forehead. The bark tea sits in your guts like a stern aunt. The red line on your arm has reached the inside of the elbow and glows in the lamplight like a thread pulled through flesh. The foreman whistles a hymn to schedules. The sashman counts bowls not yet cracked. The broker lounges with a ledger that smells like bay leaf and mould. He mentions a bigger boat coming, deeper drop, better shells, boys paid in promises with edges. Leto rolls his shoulders like he can throw off weather. Kiko touches his lucky shell and doesn't look anyone in the eye. You grease the clip, settle the rope where the skin has already given up, and step onto wood that asks nothing and takes everything. The drop is colder, quicker. A clean coin slid into a jar. Pressure lays a thumb behind your nose, your ears sign with small pops. The lip is a broken tooth. Beyond it, blue writes itself into a long vertical sentence you won't finish today. You work the seam under a brow of coral, knife in, twist, hinge, giving up its old argument. The basket thumps like a sleepy animal. The stone tugs with the idiot loyalty you rely on. Your thumb rings its bell inside the wrap. The ginger bite is a steady scold. A barracuda carves a bright insult across your vision and leaves you to deserve your job. Third set, the rope remembers to be clever and loops your ankle with the companionable confidence of old mistakes. You still yourself working the lay with blind thumbs, feeding the loop its own tail, the way Leto taught you for knots and men. Breath warms into red. Your head blurs at the rim. Panic offers to help. You decline because panic charges too much. When the loop forgets you, you take one shell for spite and ride the metronome toward the boat's shadow that smears like bad ink overhead. Surface smacks your mouth with oil rainbows and whole old diesel. The air tastes like a nail you chewed because you were bored of coins. On deck, the bigger boat has arrived. Painted bright where it isn't flaking, mast proud, a small brass bell that rings the word authority, even when wind is the only priest. Men step from it in coats that pretend to be dry, and mouths that practice price. The broker introduces them to your bowl and not to your hands. They discuss weight as if weight has no ribs. The foreman agrees with what can be carried. The sash man agrees with what can be sold. The constable agrees with what can be fined. You drink warm water that tastes like roof and regret. It lands in your belly like a wet stone. Afternoon builds a chop with teeth. The outer lip breathes like a man late to his debt. You take the smaller stone. It smirks and slides you left into a crease of old net and new demands. You peel yourself out with patient hands, nicking fibre and pride. You pry 2 shells and decide that's enough to count as hope. A jack flashes by with a remora bored enough to be philosophy. Your calves tremble at the edges. Your ribs tick like wet wicker. You rise with your careful boredom because fireworks leave funerals and funerals eat coins. By lamp, the shucking is arithmetic with flies for punctuation. Meat slides, shells powder. Your forearms burn where chalk meets sweat. The broker calls today's moons modest and tomorrow's mythical. The big boatmen nod like weather. Coins arrive late and smaller. Rope wear arrives early and heavier. Leto slides you a sliver of dried mango like a secret. It tastes like sunlight you can pocket. Kiko counts his blisters as if they're beads. Home is soup that tastes of leaf and apology and rice that clings like a good lie. Your mother's cough is smaller and sharper. She pats your red line with cloth that smells like wet bark and tells it to reconsider. Your sister reads about a city where the streets shine after rain, and you both try to imagine wet that doesn't smell like rope. You write your name again and the hooks sit like they mean it. Night sweats. Geckos count. The sea steps across the roof politely. You lay your bandage under your cheek and tell yourself you'll work careful tomorrow. Tomorrow laughs in the foreman's whistle. Dawn walks in on bare feet and tracks sand across your thoughts. Your arm is a map you don't like reading. The red road climbs toward the crook, warm and sure. The bark woman eyes it and says less diving, which is funny in the same way taxes are. The broker is early, smelling of bay leaf and plans. The big boatmen talk quotas, deep shelves, black lips, the kind of wealth that leaves boys the colour of old rope. Leto ties your stone like he's muzzling a story you can't afford to tell. Kiko fusses with his charm and pretends he doesn't. The beach is smoke, wet wood, fish oil, and a hint of rain still thinking. You grease the clip, pull the rope up into the old bruise on your hip, and step onto a plank that remembers names better than posses do. The first fall is brutally clean. Cold takes the fever's edge and leaves the argument. Pressure thumbs your nose, your ears answer in small irritated pops. The lip drops away and the blue writes its long sentence. You work the undercut where the shells sulk with their old grey fur. Knife, twist, patience that feels like malice. The basket thumps, the stone tugs. Your thumb peels its bell. A small cloud of glassfish stitches and unstitches itself around your forearm, disapproving. You pry 3 and then a 4th that makes you pretend to believe in time. Breath warms, you rise. A careful boredom you put on like a shirt. Third run, Kiko goes early and goes wrong. The rope eats his ankle, kind as memory, then decides to learn a knot you never taught it. You see the tug that means bad thinking, and you drop into it, ears biting, lungs already insulted. Kiko's eyes are big enough to cook rice in. The stone sulks against a ledge. You cut the loop, shove the stone off with your heel, and thumb the knot on his basket, all while your chest lights its fuse. The reef breathes grit into your nose. The water grows a taste like old iron and mean pennies. You shove him toward Dalup. He learns the metronome while afraid. You climb behind him with the impatience of a boy, borrowing seconds at a rate he can't pay. Surface breaks open and teaches your mouth air again. The foreman hangs Kiko over a knee and beats the water out like it owes rent. Leto swears short and useful. The broker looks bored by survival. The big boatmen ask about volume. Kiko coughs, laughs, cries, and vows the rope owes him apologies. You drink warm water that tastes like roof and nails. It hits your belly and sits like a rude guest. The foreman says lighter stones for Kiko and heavier for you because fate loves a joke with paperwork. Afternoon drags its knuckles. Short chop mast singing, wind smelling of leaf, and rain stored somewhere inland. You go because tomorrow charges interest. Under the lip, the surge gets grabby. It slams your basket into a knob and your wrist into the hinge and writes a hot, tidy line that the water erases like a thief. A grey bracket slides in again. Leto answers with sweet meat and boredom. The bracket closes. Your calf mutters. You stroke it with kicks that refuse to care. Breath warms and the edges of your sight blur like damp paper. You choose the dull arithmetic that keeps boys breathing and mothers quiet. By lamp, the shucking is punishment with honeyed light. Meat slurps, shells powder. Your forearms sting where chalk meets sweat. The broker calls the day's moons serviceable and tomorrow's inevitable. The big boatmen nod like weather that is already decided. Coins arrive late and small, ropeware arrives prompt and fat. Leto presses a slice of dried mango into your palm and says it's for your sister's book, which is not how mango works and exactly how kindness does. You let it melt into memory. Home is rice and thin soup with ginger speaking louder than the fish. Your mother's cough hides in her sleeve and pretends to be shy. She pats the red road with cloth that smells like leaf and tells it to turn around. Your sister reads about sailors who never get wet, and you both snort in the same breath. You write your name again and the hooks sit cleaner. Mina. The mat remembers your shape with a complaining kindness. Geckos tick. The sea walks polite steps across the roof. You tuck your bandage under your cheek and tell tomorrow it can try to be kinder. It won't. Morning smears grey across the water and forgets to apologise. The red road on your arm has crept to the bend and glows faint, wrong, warm. The bark woman says rest and you hear hunger argue louder. The broker smells of bay leaf and ink. The big boatmen smile like weather written down. The foreman whistles the same hymn until it stops being music. Leto ties your stone like a prayer said sideways. Kiko rolls his charm between his fingers and pretends it works best when no one watches. You grease the clip, settle the rope into its groove, and step onto the plank the way you always do, like it has the last word and you respect grammar. First fall. The cold takes your heat and leaves your ache. Pressure sits behind your nose like an unpaid bill. Your ears pop like old hinges learning manners. The lip yawns and the blue writes its long sermon. You work the undercut, knife in, twist. Hinge coughing, small surrenders. The basket bumps. The stone insists. Your thumb rings its bell. The wrap loosens and the ginger sting speaks its clean sentence. A turtle glides, old and bored, and refuses to be impressed by your wages. You take 4, then 5, and the metronome in your kicks keeps you from inventing a new kind of mistake. Third run, the rope behaves and the sea does not. The surge picks you up under the brow and sets you down wrong, shoving your basket hard into a knob and your ribs into the ledge. A hot, bright line opens and the water erases the evidence before you can label it. Your chest warms past red. Your sight goes soft at the corners. Panic offers a hand you don't take. You tug once and the line is late like a man with a story. You count slow and lie to yourself about the strokes. You rise at a dull, stubborn pace that bores sharks and keeps mothers from practicing grief louder than usual. On deck the bowl is moons and wet nothing. The broker calls them adequate. The big boatmen call them volume. The foreman calls them ropeware. Leto calls them rice. Kiko calls them chances. You drink warm water that tastes like roof and nails. It hits your belly and sits. The wind tastes like leaf and wet on the way. The bell rings again because days love repetition disguised as schedule. You go because gravity is punctual and poverty is impatient. By lantern, shucking turns the world into a circle of honey light in a room of smell. Iodine, brine, meat sweet, or sweet that would be fruit if it didn't steal your appetite. Pearls drop into the rag bowl like tame moons. Most shells give you nothing but the privilege of working. Coins follow the same math as always. Theirs heavy, yours light, rope, ware, fatter than memory. The foreman counts and pockets, the broker notes and nods, the big boatmen leave with their hats dry and their promises wetter than you can use. Leto presses a coin into your palm you didn't earn and tells you not to thank him because he hates poetry. You promise to buy a stub of pencil for your sister. Promises are lighter than coins and spend the same until morning. Home is rice tamped into small bricks and soup that tastes of leaf and effort. Your mother's cough folds in on itself like laundry that refuses a line. She pats the red road with cloth that smells like bark and tells it to think twice. Your sister reads by smokier lamp about streets that shine after rain and asks if water ever looks clean. You say yes at night when the moon lies. You write your name. The hook sits steady. The page buckles under your damp hand like it wants to go back to river. You lie down on the mat that remembers you and put your bandage under your cheek to warm the pulse back into obedience. The end is not a speech, it is a shift change. The lamp guttering, the lean-to dark, the bowl with moons under a rag, the rope coiled wrong and left that way for morning hands to swear at. It is lungs that still feel rented, ribs that still creak like wet wicker, a thumb that still rings its bell. It is the foreman's whistle you will hear before you're done being tired, and the plank you will step onto because grammar demands it. Hey again, the sea will say, and you will go down into shark water and cold and pressure and the price of air, and you will come up with whatever you can hold. If you enjoyed this kind of misery, you already subscribed. Drop a comment from wherever you're watching, rate the smell out of 10. The lantern snuffs, the boat creaks. You set your jaw around tomorrow and hold your breath.